Hey y'all, hope you're doing well. In a few moments, I'm going to share with you over here a video interview that was recently conducted between a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, affiliated with the Wharton School of Business, and me. She is a contributor to Forbes. She's writing a book. We're going to get into over here is some stuff I think you'll have a lot of value from. We're speaking about the college admissions process today, success, entrepreneurship, trying to blow yourself up for success, the mindset necessary in order to make your dreams come true. A lot of interesting stuff. When it'll ultimately hopefully come out in an article form, I think you'll have value. But do check it out and please share it with other people. I think you'll enjoy, learn a lot. Enjoy. And I get into my backstory. A lot of you ask me, where'd you come from, man? What's your story? Here we go. I'll tell you. Okay. Hey, everybody. How are you? It's your friend, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Bregman. I'm here in the home office, and we have something very special for you today. I was approached by Dr. Professor Aviva Leggett. She is a professor affiliated with the prestigious Ivy League University of Pennsylvania and the Wharton Business School. She is a contributor for Forbes. She's a brilliant, successful, impressive woman. And in addition, the reason she reached out to me today is she is in the midst of writing a new book. She is interviewing celebrities, thought leaders, hotshot CEOs, famous people, and ballers across different spectrums of her life about their college acceptance process, the universities they went to. She's only interviewing people who went to some of the top ones in the country, and she's writing a book about it. She reached out to yours truly. She's also one of the foremost college admission experts in the entire country. I'm going to link to her stuff. If some of you are applying or your kids are in the next year or two, you'll want to check it out. So anyway, she wanted to interview me for the book, so I give myself over to Dr. Aviva, and I'm all yours. Ask whatever you like about my backstory.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Bregman, for participating in my book. I'm really excited. You are actually my first interview of the book. I have a number of them lined up this week. So, you're a great person to start with. I appreciate your energy and so excited to connect with you and your community. We just have a nice rapport, you and I.
Thank you. Listen, the pleasure is mine. And when you told me some of the big hitters that you've also approached, and who said yes, I feel like the Where's Waldo in the group. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of could fit in, but like if you look close and not, you know. So thank you for the honor and the opportunity, and let's help as many people as we can today, you know?
Absolutely, and you can look out for excerpts of this interview and future Forbes articles. So I know Rabbi Bregman will have my info on there, and love to hear your comments on your college experience as well. Maybe you want to share a story on Rabbi Bregman's page about what your college life was like, what your high school life was like, because I feel like this period is so transformative for so many, but no one's really talking about what this period was like. I think a lot of people have challenges during this period. A lot of people find out what they want to be doing during this period of time. So what I'm trying to understand from all of my interviewees and today with Rabbi Bregman is, what was that time period like? What were some of the key decision points? What were some of the key influences that were playing into your life at that time? And how did that go? And Rabbi, I actually read somewhere on one of the interviews that you had done that school was actually inspiring for you down your path. So tell me about that. Where were you when you became inspired to serve others?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying like this. I'll just give you some of the backstory, okay? I grew up in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm 40 years old. I was born in '77. So I graduated high school in 1995. Just trying to get put it in a time and kind of in an era. I grew up with a mentality in my community and Boca and from my family, and I went to a sort of an elite private high school called Pinecrest Preparatory School in Fort Lauderdale, which is a factory that sends a lot of applicants your way to UPenn. And I grew up with a mentality where basically the key to a good life was good grades. To get good grades and go to a top school. This is what I understood from my mom and dad, especially my father. Every man in my family is a medical doctor, except for me. I was pretty much told growing up in Boca Raton in a nice way, be what you want, do what you want, find your path in life. But for God's sakes, would you be a doctor? And like if you really go off the path, like a lawyer, but of course, be you, do you, but So I grew up in this kind of mentality where I was inspired that this is what I was supposed to do. So you go to the best school you can, for example, for high school if you can. You take all the college courses you can, all the APs. You just crush the SAT, you know, as best you can. Now, I heard many years ago that they switched the grading. Like when I did it, I think it was out of 1,600, right? With the math and a verbal. Okay, I hear it changed a little bit. But that was basically the way I came up. And that was the expectation. And then at the end of that, you apply to a lot of top-ranked universities that are in the U.S. News and World Report. You know, and every year they have to shift around to sell a new magazine. You know, it can't be always the same. You know, is Harvard one this year or is Yale one? You know, they have to move to have some drama, to move some copies. That's basically what I did. My father pretty much told me which 4 schools to apply to. I did. I applied to University of Miami because I was a football fan of the University of Miami, and my father was a booster of the football program. I was told by the admissions office at the university, my high school applied me on their own to University of Florida. I didn't even apply. They just on their own applied me and accepted me. I was told by my dad to apply to Brandeis, and I did. And he told me to apply to Emory, and I did. I went 4 for 4. I was accepted to all of them. It was pretty simple. When he was growing up in New Jersey, his mom told him you have to apply to Rutgers and that's where you're going to go. And he applied and he went. So I was just doing the Bregman thing. And that's the short version of how I got to Emory, if that gives you any kind of context or backstory.
Well, I'm curious how you made sense at the time of this idea that, you know, these are the 4 schools you applied to, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. How did you feel about that? Do you remember that time and what I guess what opportunity you made of that? Did you feel limited or did you feel like, okay, this is what I got to do?
Well, I didn't mind it because I was always, you know, a great student. I had great grades. I think in high school, between junior, senior year, I did 800 volunteer hours at a nursing home. My father was the medical director there, and I wasn't even doing it for hours that I needed for school. I was doing it for the kindness of it because I love to make people happy and cheer them up and take them out of pain and frustration. So I had that. I think my junior year in high school, my father had me in a summer taking pre-med classes at the University of Miami. And I ended up forming a relationship with one of the deans of admissions over there who ended up accepting me to the University of Miami Medical School as a freshman in college because I was like, he liked me and he said, Bregman, as long as you do well, you're gonna make it. The summer between high school and the start of freshman year, I applied for a medical research position at Harvard Medical School in the School of Epidemiology, and I was accepted. I was like Doogie Howser, like this like 18-year-old kid. So I liked it. I enjoyed it. I wasn't in love with the science, but I didn't feel limited, and I saw that my father had a nice lifestyle and all his friends being nice Jewish doctors in Boca Raton. So I didn't feel kind of limited and constricted, but the part I liked most about it was the talking to people and helping people and the bedside manner, cheering them up part, more than the blood and the guts and the science and the organic chemistry molecule kit.
Mm-hmm. So how did your family respond when you told them that you didn't want to go in that direction?
Yeah, well, at first, I mean, wondering what was wrong with me, if anything, but at the same time, basically supportive. When I look back on my life, there was many elements in play that already were existing, which now I see in retrospect when I can connect the dots, indicated that I wasn't going to stay in that world forever, okay? Meaning, let me back up 3 steps, and I don't just mean on camera, you know? Ose Shalom Bim Romav, you know? Like, I'm not trying to be cute, right? But back up a couple steps. I think one of the biggest factors that helps a person be successful is the ability to connect the dots. You know, when you learn, there's pattern recognition that helps a person succeed, right? So I didn't realize it quite at the time when it was happening, but later I see little data points that indicated that I was meant to go somewhere else and that my core strengths and DNA were going to push me in a different area. So I love to help people. I love to make them happy. I love to take them out of pain. I was a monster on the debate team in high school. I loved taking the classes where you could give a speech or a presentation. I loved that. I was amazing at it in Spanish, even in foreign languages. I love to do that. When I was 16 years old, my synagogue asked me, my conservative synagogue I went to in Boca Raton, Florida, asked me to speak at Kol Nidre, like one of the most important services on Yom Kippur, in front of about 3,000 people as a 16-year-old, and I didn't flinch at all. Like, now that I look back, I'm like, why was I not nervous? I had never spoken more than like 4 friends in the senior quad. Like, what am I nervous? Why am I not nervous? I just thought nothing about it. I had the speech. I was ready to go. You know, that was kind of part of it as well. And I gravitated towards like leadership positions, and there's many other examples as well. So I don't think it was a shock to anyone when I was given in college more chances to do more scientific research. I ended up instead gravitating towards a chance to work on Capitol Hill. I worked in the House. I worked in the Senate. Ultimately, people from both parties said to me, hey, we want you to run one day, you know, for office, because I came from like a nice district in Boca Raton. You know, I'm Jewish and I speak Spanish as well as I speak English. They said, you know, you're going to be a nice demographic candidate for us, you know? So I just found myself just drifting in those kind of talking kind of directions. So when I told my parents, I said, listen, I'm feeling more like a law school, talkative, rabbi kind of life, instead of just, you know, basically going straight MD. They were basically supportive.
That's great. And so at what point did you decide to go on the rabbinic track? Was it before Emory, during Emory?
Yeah. So being Jewish was always important to me growing up, and it was part of my identity, but I wasn't very learned in the Torah. I never met a person who was what we call Shomer Shabbat, who observed the Sabbath all the way. And so I didn't have that growing up. So what happened was, when I was in college, was the first time I ever met anyone who was what they call Orthodox or observing more than I did. And it was the first time I ever met people who actually knew Torah at an adult level. Like, I knew, like, I grew up and I went to Hebrew school till I was like 15, 16, but all we really talked about was basically from Kristallnacht in the 30s, like until like the Holocaust and the founding of the state of Israel. Like, whatever happened for like 4,000 years before that and all the depth and wisdom, like I had like no connection really to it. No fault of anyone. I'm just saying, like, I just didn't know what it was. So it was the exposure to that which I found to be transformative. And it wasn't like a one-day decision. It was just little by little, the wisdom that I was learning, I loved to share it with other people, and they were very happy to hear it from me. And that's how things happen, not overnight.
Right, right. So was it, I guess, your Hillel at Emory that inspired you to become more learned, or who did you meet? What were some of the steps that happened?
Yeah, in Atlanta, okay. So I was, my freshman year, I think I ran for the secretary position, one of the 4 board positions at the Hillel, and I won. But there was another organization on campus called the JEA, Jewish Educational Alliance, which was affiliated with the local kollel that used to have rabbis come and give a pizza lunch in a class. See, I never had social problems interacting with guys, with ladies, with friends. Like, I never had that. So some people, when I went to college, I went to Hillel looking for like a ready-made social event and scene where they could just go and be and naturally connect to people. I didn't need that. I could just say hi to people in the cafeteria or just schmooze with people in class and just get invited to parties and things. I didn't need the Jewish organizations so I would have a means to make a friend. Do you follow? So for me, I never, when I was in college, I wasn't drawn to the, I didn't need to make a blue and white t-shirt, you know, tie-dye. Like, I remember it was a program when I was a freshman, like, blue and white kachol v'levan for like Israel, or like to connect to, like, I just didn't need the kind of structured social programming. I only was seeking like the wisdom and stuff. So I only wanted to go where the classes were so I could learn something new and stretch my mind and my brain and my soul and like become better. I always wanted to be the best, biggest, most massive version of myself that I could. So socially, you know, I had friends that I lifted weights with, and I had friends that I did Shabbat with, and I had friends that I would go have fun with. You know, like I had those friends, but I didn't need that, you know, formal campus Jewish scene for like, you know, like who to roll with on a Saturday night. You know what I mean? It was more, I was seeking the wisdom, you know, like I have some copies of the Talmud behind me. Like I wanted to know who knew that. So I ended up sort of connecting with the rabbis from the community that would come and teach, and then spending a lot of time in their community on the weekends and Shabbat and holidays, and, you know, progressing from there.
Excellent, excellent. So was there any point in which you were progressing in your learning that you came into a time of cognitive dissonance, where something that you thought was true that you sort of disproved to yourself as you were going through your learning?
Well, I would just say this. The main thing that my personal learning sort of made me aware of was, it wasn't anything that was like contradictory, but it's a question of where your focus is, right? If your only focus, my focus when I went to college was basically to just like get straight A's. I didn't even go to have fun, and I did great. I think I was on the dean's list. Y'all could go fact check me. It's true. I think I was on the like dean's list like 6 out of 8 semesters, you know, at Emory. And I think you had to be like in the top 10% of your class to be in it or something. So I had like a 3.8 or 3.9, like 6 out of 8 semesters minimum, you know, and the other 2 semesters weren't so bad, I assure you. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, it wasn't anything that was different, but just what I was learning, thinking about in college, nobody ever got into any of the classes like, why am I here? What is the meaning of life? Why were you created? What happens to you when you die? You know, like just there was like certain questions, like tying it all together. So I didn't find anything that was contradictory, you know, or that I had like a cognitive dissonance moment. It was just more like, it was just addressing stuff that I was interested, like, hey, like, you know, like I used to think some people are angry and some people are not. I never learned any wisdom on how do you deal with a temper if you feel cranky because you didn't have your coffee or anything else. Like I just found it interesting, you know what I mean? Or like, you know, every person experiences laziness. I don't know anybody who's, you know, foot is on the gas pedal life forever, 24/6 or 24/7. But we all have moments we feel lazy. What can you tell yourself to motivate yourself to push out of it? I didn't know Judaism had anything to talk about that. That's what I found interesting, but that's not what I was getting in, you know, liberal studies or pre-med or Orgo, Bio, Chem, Calc, English, you know, like I just wasn't getting that there. So that I was getting the stuff that I found nourishing there, and the stuff that I just needed to basically rock the GPA, I would go do in school.
That's great. Well, it sounds like you did really well in it at Emory, and that your application process was fairly straightforward. You knew where you were going to apply. You got in. There weren't any major hurdles there. Can you give me an example of a struggle that you may have experienced during this period or in the period following college? Anything to do with the transitional time? I know many of my students do get very stressed out socially or, you know, about their goals and things like that. What, you know, do you have an example of a time that happened to you?
Yeah, well, I would say 2 points. Between my sophomore and junior year, at that point in time, I knew that I wanted to basically become a rabbi and go do that as my main thing in life. My parents, so I had in mind, I said, you know, I'm paying a lot of money, my parents are, and I am, and took on with student loans to be here. And to do that, why don't I just transfer to University of Florida, which is a very good state school, you know what I mean? But it's not going to cost what Emory did. And my sister is there. Why don't I go transfer there? You know, as a practical move. That was one thought I had. You know, at the time, you know, and I wasn't kind of quite sure, you know? So my parents said to me, no, listen, if you want to become a lawyer, you want to become a rabbi, just look, you're doing well here. Stay put. Don't do us any favors and just, you know, finish Emory. So like, that was like one point, you know, I had a moment like that. I had something, obviously you're talking about undergraduate. I had something similar at the beginning of law school. I'm very simple. Like I applied only to, I think 2 law schools, I think for law school. I applied to Emory. I was already there. and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, if you know what I'm trying to say, to stay put. And then the other place I applied to was Northwestern Law School. I went there, had an interview with the Dean of Admissions, and I was being they were looking at me seriously, you know, to go move to Chicago, but they made me an offer at Emory I couldn't refuse, and I stayed put. But even then, my first year in law school, I was saying, you know, I want to be a rabbi. I don't really want to be a lawyer anymore. Maybe I should just leave law school and save money and something like, you know, so that was kind of a transition time. My parents had a firm mentality. They said, look, you've come so far, just finish this up and wrap this up. You know, each of these stages, you'll always have it. My mom used to say, in your back pocket, you know, your degrees and everything else. And if you want to go to something else in the future, you know, you'll figure that out. So, but those were the main points at which I had, you know, adversity in my mind, or some unsureness as to then, you know what I mean? As to which direction to choose. It's very hard to be 18 or 17 or 20 and you don't understand how the whole world works, even if you think you do. And even when you're 40, you don't understand it all. Maybe you understand less. But it's very hard to be that age and like have it all figured out and all the answers, you know, and be asked to make decisions with heavy financial consequences that you're going to bear for a decade or 2 or 3 more, based on what you know about the world so far. So I'm very sympathetic to students who have a hard time with that.
Absolutely. So I know you had a couple of decision points. You had your undergrad decision, your law school decision. Was it money mainly that drove you in the direction to go to Emory, to go to your law school, or was it something else?
I just had a mentality in my mind, which I got from I realized this is just how I understood the world to work. Basically, the template that was installed and downloaded in my head, there wasn't Google back then. Like when I was a freshman at Emory, we were one of the first universities in the country that had email, okay? That like students got email. So I got like an envelope, you know, this is just a random envelope, you know, so over here, probably a bill in the office, right? I got an envelope and it had my name on it, and it like I opened it, I'm like, well, what is this? And it said, you have an email address. And I'm like, I don't even know what an email is. And I was sbregman2@emory.edu. Like we didn't live in a world back then where there's like so much like information, and entrepreneurship wasn't cool. So like all I had in my head was all I had in my head, right? And what I understood about the world was very simply, it's very simple. It's a template, okay? You go to the top schools you can get into, you rock it and crush it. Somehow money will appear in the future if you're a nice boy or girl who keeps your nose clean, doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs. I never did drugs. I never did weed. I never did, you know, half of the country it's already legal already. But, you know, like none of that. I never even smoked a cigarette. I just had a nice, clean life, did what I was supposed to do, and money was going to materialize. And then later on in life, I realized, and it's something we could speak about, how much was missing. And I believe that there was an era or two, you know, for a long time, and I don't know if it began in the 50s or 60s, and when it may have the window begun to close, but just getting good grades and just getting to a good school is not enough, you know, to make ends meet. For many people today, which is something we've spoken about, you know, offline, which has led to a lot of my professional involvements and a lot of my personal growth. So I know, you know, the expression like, you know, to make a long story short, rabbis make short stories long, but I'm not trying to. I'm trying to. I
appreciate it's good stuff. I think a lot of my students still have this mentality where, you know, the top schools equals a good life. And that's one of the reasons I'm writing this book, is because I want to hear from people who went to top schools and what really did drive their success. And I think certainly when you go to a top school, your network is extremely valuable and the lessons you learn are very valuable, but it's not everything, right? So tell me what you said something about that things were missing. Like you thought you did this. So what was missing from your experience that would have prepared you?
Sure. So I would tell you this straight up, and maybe for some people, this is the most valuable thing I could tell them, okay? Going to a named school can help you regionally or nationally, but it can open a door, number one, but it's not going to fix everything for you. Meaning, when I would apply for, let's say, a position, let's say a legal position or whatnot, and I went to a top, I don't know what Emory's ranked these days, 15, 20, every year they move it around, you know what I mean? They still send me, sitting here on my desk is the Emory magazines. They send me one from the undergrad and one from the law school, you know, each month, asking for donations and all, you know. But the rankings keep moving. But look, that's fine if somebody goes to Schmucky State, you know what I mean? And I went to a name school, maybe I might be one of the 6 people interviewed and get into that. But that's not enough, because I had to be the right person who could show up in the interview and present my value and pop off the page, so to speak, and in person, that I had the energy, the drive, the commitment, the work ethic to get the job done and have their problems that they're looking to be solved by me in exchange for money, okay? So I'm telling you this, whether you go to Penn, you can go to Harvard, you can go to Yale, you can go to whatever, Dartmouth, you can go to anywhere you want. But it's not going to be enough. It could help you get a door open, but you have to be someone or something special or not average when that door is open. Otherwise, you're not going to land your position. So that was one, you know, takeaway that I could tell you. You know what I mean?
You have a story about that? Do you have a time when, do you feel like when you first approached opportunities after school that you thought sort of opportunities would be handed to you and they weren't? Did you have a time when you were kind of looking for things and wondering what was happening? Or is that something you intuited as you went through your education? This
was something I always intuited, meaning if it was me being considered against somebody else, I understood the way the world worked. The person with the name brand. I'll give you an example. If somebody reached out to me and, you know, here's my phone, right? And they write to me and they say, hello. I see I'm missing 100 calls, but this is more important, right? It's true. But a person writes to me and says, hello, my name is Joe Schmo. I have no forum, no credentials, no third-party authority validating that I'm anyone or anything of any importance. Will you give me an hour for an interview? Okay. If I get that next to somebody who is a professor and an authority and a Forbes columnist and with Wharton Business School and an author and like you reaching out, who am I going to pay them most attention to? I just understood that that's how the world works. You can't just think that just because you're good or smart or nice or you got good grades, that's enough to get the job done and get people to take you seriously. So people look, so I could say, hey, I'm smart, hire me, you know, but if you go to a name brand school, that's sort of that you can borrow from their credibility and perceived third-party authority, and that could shine a light on you. But what happens when you now are in a class and everybody's kind of like that? You all rock in Emory and UPenn. Now what happens? You with me? So when I was in law school and I wanted a clerkship with one of the Supreme Court justices in the state of Georgia, and 80 people applied and they were going to take 2, Aviva, I'm not getting in because I go to Emory Law. 50 people, 80 people at Emory Law are applying for 2 positions, you know, with Justice Hugh Thompson, I think was his name, and I ended up working for him, right? I was one of the 2 people selected. So I'm just saying, I understood intuitively that your school and your name brand can get you some opportunities, you know, but what happens when everybody's that? What happens when everybody showing up at Emory, for example, you know, got like a top SAT score and top grades and top GPA, you know what I mean? Like, that's what kind of, you know, that's what kind of like happens. That's sort of like, you know what I mean? Like, this is what by the way, I always was an enormous college football fan, and I was always very into the rankings, because in college football, like in college baseball and college basketball, the rankings matter, right? Look, I'm a 5'11" Jewish boy from Boca. You know, when I was now I'm 220, but when I was like in you know, like I filled out and I'm good. But when I was like freshman, I was like 150 or something, you know, like 140, right? I wasn't going to play for a college elite football team, right? Although I was a very, very good baseball player. Story for another day. But I was always sensitive to rankings. So like, it was in my DNA. You want to go to the best ranked place you can. But what happens if you're a 4 or 5-star blue chip prospect? Everybody wants you from the top places, and you show up And now you're just one of 85 people at the University of Miami or Alabama or Michigan or whatever on the roster that's also, you know, who runs a 40-yard dash in that time and everything else. Now what do you do? So I think the schools you go to can help push you out, okay? And we didn't speak about sales and marketing yet, which we need to talk about, but that was my first piece that I had to give you and your audience.
Absolutely. Well, I wonder, I know, you know, it sounds like in your college and your career, you've proceeded forward, you know, with an optimistic outlook and a lot of confidence. I know a lot of smart people, though, who suffer from imposter syndrome and, you know, feeling like they're not good enough, even if they're at an Emory and Harvard or Penn, they feel like, you know, they're not good enough, they're not smart enough, and they kind of hold themselves back. You know, what perspective do you have on that? Have you had those kinds of moments yourself?
Thank God, no, not really. I always thought I was plenty good enough and destined for great things. I don't know how to say where that came from my self-esteem, from my parents, from my school, from my soul. I don't know. I always believed that I was meant for great things. And I'm not embarrassed to say this on camera, for greatness, for great things, for broad impact. I just knew it. I just knew it that was going to happen. Not as a jerk and not as a pushy and not like, hey, look at me. I just knew who I was and what I was made of and that things were going to happen. And I believe that that's why I came down into this world, was in order to have a broad impact and uplift people and take people out of pain and to, you know, between my business acumen and Torah wisdom and everything else, to uplift people. I can't honestly tell you, I can't tell you where that came from, but it's something that I always knew that I was going to make it, even when things were horrible.
Well, something I heard you talk about elsewhere, Rabbi, and I've found this to be true for my students as well. The students who do the best in the admissions process, I speak to this as someone who counsels students and also having reviewed applications on the Wharton side. The people who come across the best and who do the best are the people who are the most self-aware. So I wonder if you have advice on how people can increase their self-awareness, the knowledge of, you know, what impact that they could potentially have. Maybe they're smart, but they don't know how to use their intelligence, or maybe they're not sure which direction to go in. What wisdom do you have on that?
Wow. Okay. So I talk about this a lot. I write about it a lot, and I see you've come across like, we got to talk about this self-awareness thing. Okay. Earlier, I spoke about connecting the dots. Okay. Look, it's very nice to wish and want that you are someone or something. But if you're not really that, or you're not close to it, or you don't smell like you could be that, you're going to have a lot of frustration in life. A person needs to have their ego in check and humility, and I believe my spiritual upbringing and training has helped me with that, to understand what you are. And first of all, you could wish you are whatever you are, but the marketplace, and I say the marketplace, meaning the broader world, will tell you the truth if they see you that way or not. I could tell people, hey, I'm $1,000 an hour attorney when I'm practicing law. But guess what? I never tried to charge that. I don't think the marketplace will give me that. I don't even think I'm that. But even if I thought I was that, you're not going to get it. The marketplace tells you the truth. I could try today to resuscitate my baseball career, and I was very good and scoutable and, you know, like a long time ago. But if I tried, I messaged you the other day, Brandon Steiner is connected to the New York Yankees. If I tell him, I need a big favor from you, hook me up with a scout. I want to be on the Yankees this year. I want to be first base, right? Hook me up with a scout. I could wish from now till tomorrow that but the marketplace will tell you you're not. They're going to be like, bro, like go back to a yeshiva or a conference room. Like it's not going to be. So you can wish whatever you want. So I think a person needs the humility to understand that there's many ways to succeed in this world, and you can have passion, but you need to be honest and see the feedback that you're receiving from the world, from life, from people. Then you have to connect the dots and see where you rock. See, all of us have areas that our skill set is very prosaic. You know, we're average. From 1 to 10, we're a 5, right? Then there's areas that we're a 2, and there's areas that we're a 10 and maybe a 12 out of 10, right? a certified 20 out of 10, right? So if I would draw a picture right now for you of a person and you would hold it up to an art project I made when I was 7, there's probably very little difference between, you know, how I draw it today and I drew back then. I can't do it. But I look back and I see I was able to speak, I was able to communicate, I was able to persuade, I was able to sell, I was able to convey, I was able to create excitement, I was able to take complicated ideas and synthesize. Lo and behold, you could be a trial lawyer, you know what I mean, in front of a jury. Lo and behold, you could take 4,000 Torah sources and condense it into a book I wrote called Short and Sweet on the Parsha, which is the best-selling book on the Parsha in the world 3 years in a row, which basically is go through encyclopedia of thousands of sources and condense it down into bite-sized English pieces this big, you know? So you have to know what you are and be truthful about it. And if you don't know, you maybe should ask somebody that's honest, that likes you, and maybe they could help you out, because you're going to just smash your head against a concrete wall if you live in a fantasy land as to what life really is versus what you want it to be.
What advice do you have for people to look for those signs, for those connections? How do they, how can they strike you when that might not be your natural way of thinking? How do you look for those sources of inspiration?
Yeah, well, I think a person just needs to take an honest step back and collect evidence as to where are you doing well and where are you not. I wasn't going through some formal evidence procedure, but then I look back on my life and then I realized, like, now I look back and say, oh, it all kind of makes sense. Like in high school, I didn't want to be in the band. I wanted to do the debate team and crush it and argue, you know? I remember being 10 and my mother saying to me that I was a pain in the tuchus, you know what I mean, a Yiddish for the rear end, for being so argumentative, and I wouldn't let a point go, and I had to explain my point, you know what I mean? It's being 16 years old and being asked on Yom Kippur to speak in front of thousands of people, and it was 5 years later until it occurred to me, why was I not nervous? You know what I mean? It's all those kind of experiences that sort of give that over. I think it's sort of, and looking, where am I winning and where am I not? And then asking yourself, see, if you can marry what you're good at and match it with concentric circles as to things that you like as well. There's things that I'm very good at, but I don't have passion for them. So you can see I'm really good at something, and the world says I'm great at something, and I happen to have excitement for that thing, and, you know, and like they start to have overlap. Over there, you could do well. I could be the #1 world expert in underwater basket weaving, but if I'm not feeling it in my heart and I don't like it, I'm not going to want to craft a career around it. So you do need some overlap.
That makes sense. And I know one of your passions is sales and marketing. So, you know, I know we've talked about speeches. Can you give me a couple of maybe one story or two stories from your years in high school or college of what built you up to this point of being this thought leader and influencer in these areas?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll take all the compliments. My mom's going to watch this interview, you know, so anything nice you say, my Ima, my mom in Boca Raton's going to have nachas, you know. So what I would just say is this. It's interesting, speaking of connecting the dots, I was thinking to myself earlier today, I wonder what Dr. Leggett, Dr. Aviva is going to ask me, you know, in the interview. And I said, she might ask me, what was the best, most impactful book you read in college, right? I'll tell you the honest truth. Other than the Torah and stuff like that, I don't remember the books we learned back in college. I got the textbooks I needed to, and I did what I needed to do. The only book that I actually read in college, more than, you know, in a perfunctory, superficial way, that I actually read was one that I picked up at the Emory bookstore that wasn't even assigned for my class. You hear? So what was this book? It was a book by Cialdini called something like something about the psychology of persuasion, or influence the psychology of persuasion, something like that, by a professor named Robert Cialdini, right? I still remember that was and it wasn't even, I was in the library, in the bookstore, I saw it and I picked it up. It was the most interesting thing I read in college. And it wasn't even for my class. It wasn't even for my department. It had, my major, it had nothing to do with me. So I just think it really is going to boil down to a person understanding, like, what do you need to make it? You know, we're talking about these concentric circles. I'll give you another one. What is valuable in the world, okay? And this really, I can't not give this over to you in the interview, okay? Okay, here's what happened. I got out in the world, and I was smart and everything else, but I met a lot of other smart people, doctors and lawyers and business people and dentists and accountants and all kinds of other things that did not have enough revenue, okay? They had enormous amounts of wisdom in their head as to how to do their technical thing, but they didn't have enough people to pay them for that. And then I realized that there was a big piece missing, and this is something I would make sure that every college student has to learn about sales, sales training, how to use the phone. There's nothing wrong with picking up the phone and reaching out to people today. How to network, how to make an elevator pitch, how to present your value proposition. How do you basically make yourself have a unique value proposition that separates you and your service from everybody else in the marketplace? How do you follow up? How do you follow up creatively with an unsold prospect? How do you not be annoying? How do you basically manage a CRM, some kind of customer relations management software? And how do you do that? Because if you don't know how the psychology of how people think and how to communicate to them, they're never, and also get people's attention, you're never going to make money, right? So I basically ran into a very big brick wall that I was basically poor and broke, though despite the fact that I was a genius. I have frames here, how many diplomas and degrees I have? Come with me in the next room, I'll bring the laptop, you go see. So I think every person has to learn how to market, pitch, sell, and get attention. Because if you could do that, you'll always have money. You'll always be able to fight your way out of it. But just being smart and having book knowledge, you're going to be DOA. You're going to be dead on arrival in the real world. And I see that again and again. That's part of why I created the Jewish Executive Learning Network in 2010 and 11, so I could begin to share with young professionals, not just of Jewish background, of any, how to basically get out of it. Because there's a lot of smart people that don't have six pennies to rub together, and it's because they're missing this key core skill. Mm-hmm. I'm with you. I'm just adjusting the light. I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the idea of books that people should read. So I know that, in school you do get a lot of knowledge, but you're right, a lot of that knowledge can come in unexpected ways, like books that aren't assigned for class or conversations you have. So do you have any other books that to recommend that people can read, or resources online that they can access that would help them to acquire this kind of knowledge?
Sure. I mean, obviously a person, if they want, they could go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rabbi Bregman. I'm Rabbi Bregman everywhere. RabbiBregman.com, Facebook.com/Rabbi Bregman, Instagram.com/Rabbi Bregman. So, like you, I have similar basically URL everywhere. So I have hundreds of videos of my own on YouTube in which I speak about this kind of mentality and stuff and wisdom and information that I had to fight hard to get. I don't have any particular books that I recommend for business. What I would say is this. I love to study the mentality of successful people, because if I read a book, if I would read something about Steve Jobs or somebody else, it's not so much the technical information. I want to see how that person thought. See, I believe firmly you can never create bigger results than you believe are possible. So first, and this is something we've spoken about separately, right? First, I think a person has an image as to what is possible for him or her that you can create, whether for your company, yourself, your family, your brand, your finances. And what is that? You have to have that image. From there, you can reverse engineer the actions and steps necessary to help you traverse the gap between where you are now and then. So I love to study big thinkers, and when I meet a lot of people who are billionaires and major players in the world, I always ask them, the number one question I ask them, one of my kids asked me the other day, "Do you ask them for autographs?" No, I don't need an autograph. I don't want to waste the opportunity. I ask them, how do you think so big? How did you think so big? I was with somebody the other day with a net worth of hundreds of millions of dollars in residential real estate. And he wanted to take me out and get to know me, maybe bring me aboard to help him with things. And I asked him, I said, how'd you grow up this way? Without getting into his identity, Guy grew up kind of like poor. I think his dad made $18,000 a year. I think his mom made $5,000 a year, and he came from a foreign country to the United States. How did you get it in your head that it was possible for you that you could basically have a $500 million in residential real estate? Because until you believed that that was possible for you, not for, even just for other people, but for you, you never were able to take the actions necessary to build your empire. How do you think so big? So my best advice is people should read the books, the works, biographies or autobiographies of people that have produced on a massive level, and try to figure out how they got to think so big. Because if you can emulate their big think, then it's just a question of taking titanic action so you can begin to, you know, move in that direction.
That's such a great question, Rabbi. So how do you think so big?
Thank you. Well, I continue to try to stretch on a regular daily basis. Well, here's what I would say. To create results is very hard because we live in a noisy planet with enormous resistance, right? Like, I'm going to post this video and it's going to be on Facebook and YouTube, and, you know, if we can make a 1-minute splice, we'll put it on Instagram, other places. But people might say, like, well, what am I competing against? You know, is it all the other interviews between, I don't know, business people and entrepreneurs and authors? No, no. Somebody's going to have a video with a cute dog that's being rescued from in California on Facebook, and they're going to be paying attention to that. Other people, you know, with people doing sit-ups, you know what I mean? And then somebody's going to have a kid who has a fever who's crying, you know, over there. There's so much competition for somebody's attention, right? You know what I mean? So it's not just in your genre, or even if you're trying to sell a book. Everything in the world could distract the person from moving forward, you know, with you. So I believe that we need to take massive amounts of action in furtherance of our goals, with understanding that it's a noisy planet. You know, whatever, if you think it's going to take 10 or 100 actions to get your thing done, I would always say add some zeros to it. You think it's going to take 10? Do 100 or 1,000 actions. You think it'll take 100, 1,000 or 10,000? Add some zeros to it, because it's hard. You know, it's hard to get things done, and it's a noisy planet. Maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised, but, you know, a person who's looking for a job, sometimes they'll apply for 2 jobs in a day, and then I don't know what they'll do. They'll play with their iPhone all day, right? So don't apply for 2 jobs. Apply for 217, right? Of those 217, 37 may get back to you. 19 may actually correspond with you. 8 will result in an interview, of which 2 they'll offer you, and you'll take one, right? You need a job. Go apply for 217. Go apply. Don't apply. That's what happens. People reach out to, I know, famous people, celebrities, influencers, thought leaders, and they're going teeny tiny small. They'll bang up one person on a message on Facebook. Hey, he didn't write me back. I reach out to this famous person. He didn't write me back. Therefore, I shouldn't start my podcast because I asked him, hey, you want to be on my podcast? Be my first guest. The person didn't reply. Forget it. I'm just going to go, you know, smoke a little something, something, or whatever they're going to go do. They quit already, right? You want to get famous people on your podcast? Write to 317 of them, right? And if you're lucky, 3 will say yes, and that'll suffice for the first 3 weeks. Like, that's the way you have to go. Yes, you have to think big, but you have to take enormous amounts of action. But a lot of people are never going to make it because they don't have the heart and the drive and the push in order to make that manifest for themselves. And that's why a lot of people don't make it, because not because they didn't have the talent or potential, because they think small and their actions are small. Their actions are so small that if I would eat it, it could get stuck between my teeth. That's how small their actions are. So no wonder you don't get anywhere. You just didn't put enough out into the world in order to get any traction. That's what happens.
Right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And what I'm hearing from you is that I think for a lot of people, I found it's like the fear of failure is bigger than the desire to succeed, right?
Yeah, I think that happens. You know how many times in the day people say no to me? You know how many times I try to accomplish something, somebody says no, or I'm ignored, or I'm shot down? If you want to be anything in life, And like in terms of the public sphere, you better be ready for rejection. Like I know I just have like looks like normal skin. This is like an old catcher's mitt of leather is my skin for how much rejection I've dealt with in life and pain and frustration. You know, this is my baseball glove here. You know what I mean? Like I'm an old catcher's mitt of how much I've taken in life of disappointment, you know, and like, you know, and no, but I don't mind. I don't mind because that's what it takes to make it there. Like, let's say I have right now a couple 100,000 people a week consuming my content across different platforms, whether it's from the Jerusalem Post to Facebook to everything else, you know, and articles and print and everything else. Do you know how many people write negative, nasty things to me? I get people literally, telling you, sometimes show people this on my phone, I take screenshots. People say, you're ugly, you smile too much, you smile too little, what's wrong with you? Do you have ADHD, DHD? People have said your family should have died in the Holocaust. I'm telling you, I get it all, you know? I get it. You just got to keep going. And if you let that kind of, if you're going to stop once you start hearing that, I mean, the game, don't even bother starting the game because you're going to get that nonstop if you try to become something.
Right. I think that's so hard. I think that's why the fear of success is so real, because people are afraid of being subjected to those kinds of offenses. So what do you do in that situation? Like, let's say someone writes something to you that's pretty nasty or mean. Like, how do you move on from that?
I kind of, well, first of all, I take a screenshot of it and I save it because one day I told this to people and they said, it's a good idea. I'm going to make a video with maybe I'll make a TED Talk out of this one day with a slide deck, you know, of like things that people say. And I just literally just ignore it and move on. Okay. You just have to understand, like we have a president right now that half the country doesn't just dislike, but deeply dislikes. And before that, I think we had a president that half the country also had passion for one way or another. You could be president of the United States and half the country literally hates your guts and wants to spit on you, right? There's nobody, Dr. Aviva, who's for everybody, right? There's nobody who's for everybody. You can't be all things to all people. If you try, you will be nothing. Okay? You have to know who you are and what you are and just put it out, and it is what it is. Because if you try to be all things to all people, like it just doesn't resonate. You know what I mean? So there, and I'll prove it to you. Can you think of one person in the world who was universally liked and loved by everybody 100% to zero? Nobody. You can't. You could try forever. There's nobody, right? The most impactful, biggest players in the world had people who didn't like him or hated him or whatever else. So there's nobody who's universally liked or loved, not in any sphere or industry. So what do you have to do? Say, look, it's going to happen. I could be a gazillionaire. I could be Gandhi. I could be Martin Luther King. I could be Moses. You know how many people didn't like Moses? It's not just in the Torah. You should see in the Talmud what some people said about Moses in his own lifetime behind his back. You know, when the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, some of them didn't say nice things. You could be Moses, you know what I mean? Or an all-time great. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to love you. So you just have to get out there, do you, and whatever happens, happen. The only way, somebody told me Aristotle said this, I never looked it up. It takes time to actually figure out all these attributed quotes if people actually really said them for real, because I don't speak Greek and, you know, and all that. But that somebody once told me that it was Aristotle who said, like, the only way to, like, never get criticism is to, like, be nothing, do nothing, say nothing. It's true. I can guarantee you if I can go sit in a corner and vanish off the face of the earth, nobody will ever criticize, but I'll be irrelevant also. So I just think you have to go. Like your book, if you know, God willing, you'll go, you'll grind, you'll finish, you'll push, you'll interview, you know, it's off the record, but who your publisher will be, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you'll get it done and get it out. If you'll push it out, it'll work, it'll sell, it'll get printed, it'll get published, it'll get edited, it'll get sold, and you'll have a book, which God willing, you know, will make a big difference to people. You know what I mean? And some people will like it, and some people say, why did they make this book? And do we need another book? And whatever, you know what I mean? Like, but what do they have? You know what I mean? So you got to just go for it. That's my view.
I totally agree, and I would apply your advice as well to those people who are applying to college now. You know, not every university is going to see your value, but you have to articulate it and understand your value in order for others to see your value. So that's what I always try to encourage my students to do, is to really learn about themselves, become self-aware, to understand their strengths and what they bring to the table, and that way, you know, take it or leave it from the university's perspective, but at least they're going to be out there, and the decision would come out either way anyway. So you might as well give it your all and do your best and really show yourself.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal advice. Look, if you get into a school or you don't get into a school, it doesn't inherently, listen, young people out there, if you catch this interview, pay attention. It doesn't inherently mean anything, okay? Like, I knew where I was going to get in. Almost, this is why it was like kind of anticlimactic when I was accepted places, because I already kind of knew. I knew I had a 780 out of 800 on my verbal. I had a very high math score, but like, I don't know, like 600 or like, I don't know, out of 800. And I had a 780 out of 800 verbal. I think that was my best recollection. You understand, like, you know, I just knew, and I had a top, you know, grades. I just knew where I was going to get in and where I would be a maybe, because everybody else was that and everything. It's already kind of known. But whether you get in or not, that gatekeeper saying yes or no doesn't mean anything. If you want to win, you want to be successful, you want to hit your goals. And I say this to my wife all the time. Nothing inherently means anything. If people say no to me, it doesn't mean I'm not going to win. It's just that person's not going to be part of the path, not part of the journey. Emory was lucky that they said yes to me, you know, and my dad sent the money, and, you know, we did a thing. And because now they're going to have me as one of their, you know, alumni, you know, who's hopefully making big moves and impact in the world. But if they had said no, I wouldn't have said I'm junk. I just basically would have gone anywhere else, and I would have made it. At the end of the day, and I'm just telling you this, you know, yes, I went to the best school I could, but at the same time, the school didn't make me. The school didn't make me. Sure, it helped open up opportunities, but even today when people say, oh, you go to school, you meet all these people and it's great, make a great network. In 1995 and 99, we didn't have that. You know, like when there wasn't a Facebook, there wasn't a LinkedIn, like if you wanted to, there was somebody you liked in your class, you had to like, I don't know, maybe collect their information on an index card or something and keep it. Like, that would have been the way to do it. So, you know, but none of that is going to be dispositive in determining how far you go or how far you don't. Ultimately, it's going to come down to you. If you bust your tail and you have something real to offer the world that's valuable, and you can help people's lives get better and solve problems that they have, you will make money. And you will go somewhere, you know, in your career. The school will not make you or break you, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great note. And I think that's a great way to end the formal part of the interview. So informally, I just want to ask, is there anything else we haven't talked about with respect to your high school, college experience, lessons learned for your career that you want to share?
I would just say, people ask me sometimes, you know, should I send my kids to school? Should I not? It's expensive. Is it worth it? Look, I think a person has to know who the child is, you know, their young man or lady, and what do they want to do with themselves in their lives. Like, if you want to be a doctor and you really know that, you're never going to go to medical school just because you watch YouTube videos about doctors. There are certain prereqs and requirements you have to do in order to get to the next step. I think, you know, and the same with law school, and same with, you know, certain other professions. That's just the way it is. You have to go to school in order to, you know, begin to play that game. I think there's a lot of people today who live in a world where entrepreneurship is like cool or fun, and they're not necessarily driven. In some cases, it might make sense for a person to work a little bit and then, you know, go to school when you're 20 instead of 17 and a half, if you don't have any clue what you want to do, and you're going to be saddling yourself with significant debt. To me, it doesn't make sense. This is just my opinion. It doesn't make sense to me, to my mind, to spend $90,000 in debt, which takes a heck of a long time to pay off if you're making the minimum payments, in order to take a job on the other side that makes, you know, $41,000 a year, and you had a chance to land that job anyway with a great attitude, you know, straight out of high school, you know? I meet people. I'm a friendly person. I met the other day somebody working at Starbucks who the fella told me he has, I don't know, like $65,000 in debt. He told me, you know, he's working at a mall in Starbucks, and he graduated college, and that's what he's doing because I don't remember what his major was. I'm not here to put down any majors, but it wasn't an easily marketable major, and that's what he's doing. So I don't think it's worth $65,000 to be 21 and working at Starbucks. Like, just work at your Starbucks, and, you know, and then if you're going to go to school, you know, kind of do it. So I think people have to decide where they want to spend that money wisely, because it's a lot of money, and when you're a kid, you don't realize necessarily what that means and the real life consequences and credit ratings and you know, and things like that. So a person might not understand the consequences of taking on that much debt for themselves when they're at a young age, especially if they have no idea what they want to do. You know, if a person just wants to be like, today it's popular, people want to be like a YouTube influencer, or like, you know, I'm going to have a YouTube channel and a million Instagram followers, and like, that's what you want to do. You don't need a college degree to do that. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So I think people need to be circumspect before they make those heavy financial decisions, because they're real. They're real for us, and they're real for the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Great advice, Rabbi. Really appreciate your time. It was great talking with you, and I'm excited to share the article and eventually the book.
Are you kidding? Share it with me. We're going to blast it out far and wide. Everybody needs to know who you are and, you know, your collected wisdom.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.